All right, so even more grammar with Mr. Keith Folse in his wonderful book that you are probably very used to by now. We're going through question 11 in his chapter 4, which is 20 hot seat or frequently asked questions. This one is about since versus for. So this is something you may get in a beginner class, maybe an intermediate class, but again, if you're a more advanced student wondering these questions, that is fine. I, as a native speaker, wonder myself sometimes, what is the actual rule behind this? And so I'm trying to figure out a place for my face to be where you can see all the things you need to see. And one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to consider this fill in the blank. I think this works. I have lived here blank 2 years. Is there a way to know whether or not to use since or for? I have lived here for 2 years. I have lived here since 2 years. As a native speaker, you may intuitively know the answer, or as an English language learner, you may intuitively know the answer. But here's the actual rule behind it, or at least the guidelines. So for, the word for, is used with a quantity of time. A quantity means a number plus a time unit. So we have a handy infographic over on the right-hand side of the screen. So for is used with a quantity of time. So quantity of time, like for 1 second. I have lived here for, I've only been here for 1 week. Since then is used for like the name of a time, like since summer, since 2019, as in the example, since my birthday. Or it can even just be something like, oh, I've lived here since I could afford it. So, like, since I could afford it, when I could afford it is a time, like kind of a label for a time. So, since versus for. Question number 12, embedded clauses. So noun clauses as embedded questions. So can you tell me where does Emily live? Why is this incorrect? I thought I had to use do in a question. So this is labeled as high intermediate by Mr. Folse. We do cover this in, I know, level 3 of our classes at Catholic Charities, maybe others. So yeah, so there's just a lot of moving pieces and little add-ons when you move pieces around. So there are 2 clauses in this sentence. The one is, can you tell me? That's the clause. And then this is a clause that's like asking for information. So we need to know what information we're asking for. So that information, like that's the direct object. This is a dependent clause that needs a direct object. So the direct object then in this case is that second clause, that clause that asks for the information, that specifies what information we're asking for. What are we asking for? We want to know where Emily lives. So that's the direct object. And then, so the form is a question word plus the subject plus the verb, but we take out the auxiliary verb, the helping verb. So no, do, did, does, will, were. Can you tell me? Yeah. So an example from actually our workbooks that we have. This is our community unit. I believe it said week 2. So how we introduce it to our students is like asking it in a more polite way, instead of saying, hey, like, you tell me this, kind of softening that question. Can you, do you mind, would you mind telling me? So embedded questions are 2 questions made into one because you're asking, can you tell me this? Yes or no? And then, where is the bus station? So you want to know, 1, if the person can tell you, 2, the actual information. So, what happened to is. So this is asking like where the verb, where it did is go in the embedded question. Here are our examples, and it's highlighted for the students. So, so you can just read those examples for yourself, and yeah, so just know it's a thing that students should be able to kind of move the pieces around. So, moving on to question number 13. So, and we actually just talked about, or I just talked about this with a student using others versus other. So, general confusion on usages across all levels because these are very similar words and similar meanings, but very different, used in different contexts. So, another just literally means one other, an other, another, one another. Others is a plural pronoun. Help yourself and others. Help yourself and them. Help yourself and the other people. Them. Help yourself and others. Other is an adjective, and adjectives are never plural in English. Like red, blue, big, small, not big, smalls. Which is why you can't say I need others books. You need other books. Which books? The other books. Not those books, other books. So these are just boom, 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 rule, rule, rule. And then it just takes practice beyond that to know which one to use in which context you're trying to either create or understand. So, and then last one for this video, we're going to move on to question 14. This is adverb clauses. So what is an adverb, right? So an adverb is something, a word that modifies a verb. So an adverb clause is a whole group of words that modifies a verb. So first, a clause is a group of words with a related subject and verb. An adverb clause is a dependent clause, meaning it can't stand alone. It needs to have another clause to express a complete idea. Other dependent clauses that we have and or will look at in this grammar training is other dependent clauses include noun and adjective clauses. So an adverb clause can do anything that an adverb can do, like it answers where, when, why, for what purpose, how is it different, how is it done, etc. So they can be recognized. Adverb clauses are often recognized by a subordinating conjunction. So we remember conjunctions are if, and, but, because, so like a linking word. So I'm like linking my fingers together. So subordinating just means like, so if you have a boss at work, you are his workers. You work under him, you are his subordinates. Subordinate. So sub usually means under, like a submarine is under the water. So sub, and then ordinate, like is order. Subordinate, you're under. So subordinating conjunction. So it's a conjunction that lets you know that what it is linking is kind of lower in order or dependent on what it's linking to. So like it's saying one is more important than the other. And then a list on the next slide. We do not have handouts in this case because this is an asynchronous video, but a list of subordinating conjunctions. So the adverb clause can go either in front of the independent clause or it can actually also go after the independent clause. Just remember that if the dependent clause, if the adverb clause goes first, it needs a comma before the main clause, so the independent clause. So example, the plane landed before the big storm began. So the independent clause is the plane landed. That expresses a complete thought. It has a subject and a verb. Plane landed. It also has a definite article. So the plane landed. When did it land? So it landed before. Before when? The big storm began. So the big storm, or before the storm even began. So, which is good because otherwise everybody would be in trouble. So before the big storm began. This is one big clause, one big phrase answering when did the plane land. So it adds details to the verb of landed. So that's the adverb clause. And then before the big, that's a typo. Before the big storm began, before the big storm began, the plane landed. So this is an example with the adverb clause in the front. Before the big storm landed, comma, the plane landed. Before the big storm began, yes. So this is a list of the subordinating conjunctions. I don't think it's an exhaustive list, but it shows that relationship between the clauses. So after although this, but still that. So subordinating conjunctions. And I think we'll wrap it up for this video. This is a good chart if you want to jot it down or just Google it. It's very useful. I have one printed out and hanging on my desk at work.